So, hello everyone and welcome. We're now ready to begin today's webinar, Professional Presentation Skills.
Thank you, Ginny, and welcome to you all on this wonderful day. We are going to spend the next 30 minutes of our time together talking about presentation skills, and we've broken it down into a couple of key areas. One of those areas is you and how important you are to the success of every presentation that you give. We are going to talk about the presentation itself and that presentation from a structure and an organization perspective. What can you do to make it a wonderful experience for you and your audience? We are going to talk a little bit about visual aids. I could do a whole several hours on visual aids, but we're going to share with you how to utilize them, not how to prepare them. We're going to talk about audience interaction and how you can get the maximum interaction from your audience, even if you have a minimum amount of time, like we have here. And we're going to look at what are some of the things that you can do along the way so that at the end of your presentation, you get a real wow factor. And I want you to start to think about that presentation in terms of it being a conversation that you're having with another. And that could be one and or more than one. And that more than one, excuse me, that more than one could be in a bigger room with you at a stage. So as you can see, going from the small to the large, the same skills can be utilized. The last thing that we're going to talk about, but certainly not the least of things that we're going to talk about, is how do you gain some commitment to action for the information that you are presenting. What you want to make sure is that people walk away knowing what to do with the information. And that's why questions are so important. Sometimes that's the question that they have. What do I do with this information that we have spent this time together? So let me start to answer that question for you here. What I want you to do, before you can answer what to do with the information, is I want you to pick up a pen or your writing device, and I'd like you to think about what is it that you would like to learn in this next 30 minutes. I'd like you to write that down in the form of a question. How do I? How do you what? What is it that you'd like to know more about? That's going to set an intention for you to listen to this information, and it's certainly going to cause your mind to interact with the information. The second thing I'd like to share with you, as Ginny mentioned, we will have an opportunity to have a question and answer session at the end of our presentation. However, sometimes you have a question at the beginning and you forget it at the end. So to make sure that that doesn't happen, what I'd like you to do is keep that writing utensil, implementation device, whatever you have, next to you and write down the questions as they come to mind as we are speaking. This will make that question and answer time more robust for all of us, and you will walk away with the things that you need to be more effective. Sound like a plan? Well, let's continue. We know that a presentation is nothing more than the communication process occurring, where we've got a source of the information going to someone or ones that are going to receive the information, and that message needs to be translated and will be translated, its context along with its content. Okay, so everything around the conversation as well as the information being translated is going to be in that feedback. So it's very important for you as the deliverer of information to understand you've got two things to watch. One are your receivers, and two is the environment with which you are presenting your information. And we want to make sure that we control all the things that you can control, but not be controlling. So let's talk about what that means. The element of success here, as you look at the communication process, we focus it on three things: your words, your vocal quality, and your nonverbals. As you can see from this graphic, your words, i.e. your PowerPoint, are 7% of your success factor. The majority, 93% of your success, has everything to do with your nonverbals and your vocal quality. When you put all three together, you have a wow factor, and that's what we want for you. So the question becomes, what is it that your body is saying as you are speaking? How does your body move? How does it want to move? Are you aware? We're going to talk about how you become more aware. The second part, 38%, is your vocal quality. That is your tone, the pace, the rate with which you speak, the volume, where you accent, and some of us today may not be from the United States. And our accent, as we call it, may give a intonation or a rhythm to our words. And we need to be aware of that so that we can make sure our message is being received and understood the way it intended. Funny story here, I've got many clients who are global, and when we meet and bring people from all around the globe together, our first interaction usually is to find the person who has the accent. For most of us, do not believe it's us, but to someone else's ear, it is different. That in and of itself, and we know states in the United States that have different accents as you move through that state. We want to make sure that the presentations that you give, that you remember, you are the most important part of the presentation. And so what does that mean? That means that you will be the one to translate that information into the action that someone else can take. And one of the actions at the end is that they're wowed by your presentation, that they thank you, whether it's verbally and or with clapping, whatever it is, that this was a great meeting. And that is certainly something that we all want and certainly need so that we can continue to be better. I often get asked the following topics as it comes to questions, and you may have found that your questions, as you glance at them, or what you want to learn in this presentation fall in one of these categories. How do I prepare and organize? How do I display numbers and graphs and charts? How do I manage my time? Certainly from an audience perspective, how do I get them engaged and keep their attention when I only have a short period of time? And or how do I fill the time and keep them engaged as I move forward? I often tell people the longer you have, the easier it is. The shorter the presentation, the more preparation you need, so that you can make sure the number one thing that you do is stay on time and value people's time. That's one of the things today that is glaring at us all. We all have something else that we want to get to, yet we want to devote ourselves in the time that you have said you needed for me. So let's move on in our time and look down this road of how do we become better at this skill called presentation skills. What we want to make sure, and first and foremost in your mind, I want you to remember that you want to be as simple, uncomplicated that means, as possible. Using big words and acronyms and all of those things may not be appropriate. You want to speak in terms of simplicity to your audience. So the one question you want to ask yourself as you are preparing is, who is my audience? What is it that they need from the information? And then how best can I deliver that as simply as I can? You get a very short period of time to translate your information so that someone gets it. They should get your message in about 3 seconds. So as you look at that, being too wordy, you'll lose somebody's attention. Remember, we are an instantaneous society today. So we want to look at you, and how do you present with confidence, with clarity, with authority, so that you can get your message across. So let me ask you a question, and I'm going to elicit Jenny here for some help here. The question is, are you afraid of public speaking? Jenny, why don't you share what they should do?
Okay, so we just launched a poll, and we invite everybody to vote for this, to vote in this. And we'll just give it a couple more seconds, and then we will share the results. And we'll just do it maybe about 10 more seconds. Okay, we're gonna close it on out, and we're gonna share the results. So the question: are you afraid of public speaking? 56% said yes, and 44% said no.
Ah, wonderful, and thank you. Thank you all for participating in our poll. Thanks, Jenny, for summarizing it for us. Well, I just want to say you're not alone. As we look around the globe, this is one of the global fears and the largest global fear there, public speaking. And, you know, we often joke As you look at the next largest fear, 16% is death. So we're afraid of speaking more than we're afraid of dying. And the joke often is that the person who is giving the eulogy at a funeral would rather be in the coffin than give the eulogy. That's how this fear resonates. So what we want to do is look at what is it that we can do to prepare ourselves so that we're not afraid. And the first thing I want you to realize is that fear, F-E-A-R, is an acronym. And it stands for false evidence appearing real. So there's something that has occurred in your mind that could be a limiting factor for your success. Like, have you ever said to yourself, oh, they can see me shaking, or I don't know what to do with my hands, or I'm speaking too fast, or what do I do? Those are all things that are controllable, and not having strategies to control them, they appear as if they take over and will diminish your success. I'm here to tell you that with a little practice and a little patience and a lot of want, got to want to be better, that you can make that less for you. And I'm talking one less, right, each time that you speak. So first thing I want you to be aware of, and think about this for yourself, is where does this fear resonate in your body? Remember, your body speaks. Do you demonstrate it? This particular visual here, look at the posture, look at the facial expression, and you can see fear, right? Does any of that resonate with you? How about this? Oftentimes, we know that using our hands, certainly biting our fingernails, is a sign of some kind of anxiety. How about this? Can you tell if she's afraid? She could very well be. But what she has done is effectively use some strategies not to show it. So what are some of those strategies that you can use in order to make sure that nobody can say, oh, you were so afraid? And by the way, let me just tell you, as we look at some of the things that we can focus on, your hands, your rate with which you speak, how to prevent mental block, the panicking, and certainly the emotion of embarrassment, remember that the things that you do, your audience wants you to succeed. Right? They don't want to see you fail. They haven't come to waste their time. So your audience is with you, and you have to remember that. That's just a little tidbit to remember. So what do I do with my hands? There are many strategies with which you can do. Everything from speak with them intentionally, as if you were talking about one. I might point with my finger number 1, and pointing meaning I would not point at my audience. I would make the one hand work with the other and do 1 and 2 and 3. I might use my hands as far as gesturing, making sure that my gestures are larger than normal to make a point. So there are many things I can do with my hands. If my hands are shaking, the one thing I want to make sure I don't do is hold anything. If I hold something and my hands are shaking, it's going to call attention to it, and I don't want to call that attention. Talking too fast, I want to make sure I breathe. I want to make sure I practice. Those are 2 very key things that you can do. Mental blocks, having notes. And there's nothing worse than having notes that you can't read. So there are all kinds of strategies with which, what font, what size you should have your notes. There are ways to use PowerPoint where you can see your screen and your notes and the clock. So you want to make sure you use your technology. Panic. The only time that you will panic is if you are not confident, and the one thing you can do from a confidence perspective is say, I am prepared, and mean it. Right? So that practice time becomes important. If things go wrong, they're going to go wrong. Okay? Nobody's perfect. So what you want to do is know that your audience is with you. Right? No reason to be embarrassed. The audience is with you, and you want to think through what could go wrong before you present. Let's say technology went out. The show must go on. Let's say you drop your notes. The show must go on. Let's say the room is too hot. The show must go on. You, though, need to have a strategy with what to do about it. Controlling, not eliminating. That is the thing that I want you to get into your head. You want to make sure you've done everything you can, and you will have it less of an interference in your success, and that is key. Particularly when it comes to the symptoms of anxiety. And as you look at the 4 symptoms here, notice what happens to yourself the next time you're giving a presentation. Do you feel this anxiety, this fear in your heart, in your stomach, in your limbs shaking, and or in sweating? Those are all natural body functions when your stress level is elevated, and there are just as many, if not more, strategies to control them. You want to remember that the purpose of you speaking with your audience, it's not about you, it's about your message. And what is it that your audience has come to learn from you? Remember, there's a reason why you are delivering this message, and that reason is you have something to offer. You need to believe that. Preparation starts with the mind. In your mind, you want to make sure you have a clear goal. We have talked about solid preparation, meaning practice, 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 and that means more than your PowerPoint. That means could be standing in front of a mirror, looking at what it is that your body is saying along with the words that you're using and listening to your vocal quality. Remember that circle? That is going to help us speak with success in mind. So we're talking about body language. Let's look at that. Your body speaks, and what it says and what it doesn't say is important to your message. So while I could spend days on what your body is saying, here we have just some indications of what some people might take from the gestures. What we want to do is be purposeful in our movements, making sure that they are adding value to your presentation. That's why practice is very important, and practice in front of others so that they can give you some feedback on what it might be better for you to do and or not to do. One of those things we've talked a little bit about is gestures, and in this picture here you'll see the direction of her hands. I would suggest to you that a much better visual would be for her to raise her palms towards the ceiling and have them outwardly focused towards her audience, spread wide. That is a more inviting way to speak. Oftentimes presenters don't recognize that they've only gone halfway with their gestures. That's the up way, and they need to come fully engaged, and we've just talked about what that full engagement means. It'll make a difference in the receptivity of your audience. Again, bringing back our success factor, when you combine your gestures with your vocal and make sure that your content on the PowerPoint and the words that you are saying marry, that's a recipe for success. The one thing you can control always is your ability to smile. And your smile, if you remember this, this saying, smile and the world smiles back at you. Remember, your smile comes through on the phone, your smile comes through as you are walking. It's a very inviting thing. And no extra charge for this information. You could become part of the 2% club. The 2% club, you're probably asking yourself, what is that? The 2% club is only 2% of the population smiles. Most people think they're smiling, and they're not. So you could stand out and be more inviting just by smiling more. And that's full smile. Remember, you got teeth there. Your dentist will be proud. As you start to look at what we've been talking about here in our presentation skills format, we've been talking about what makes a good presentation, and that's part of you, how to harness some of those nerves, some prep, and we're going to talk just a little bit more about preparing, and a structure. We talked about delivering your style and using your body for that, and we talked about your vocal skills, and certainly we have emphasized practice. So let's talk just a little bit here about how to go about the total presentation experience. And as you see on the screen here, it's everything that you see. What you say, your slides, your presence, your audience interaction, and your handout. One thought about handouts, and there are 2 roads about handouts. If you're going to use them, when do you give them to your audience? One is that you can give everything to your audience at the beginning of your presentation. The second is give your audience their information as needed basis. Well, let's talk about that just briefly, in that your audience, whatever they get in front of you, the one thing that they will do is want to look at it. So you need to allow time for that. So it could be on the table before you start. They could look at it and or pause if you're giving it to them. But in either case, you want to be directive in how you use the handout. You want to tell them, we're now on page 5 in the lower paragraph. Keep them on target. Yes, you're going to have people who will move forward. Again, control what you can control, and that is the direction that you give, and you'll success in using your handouts. Putting together your presentation, I like to use the rule of 3. Keep your presentation to 3 main ideas. And as you prepare, put your main ideas and all the relevant information to that idea in one spot, including what story can you tell around that idea. That story is going to become important as you connect ideas. Your job is to be a connector of the information from start to finish. And as you connect your ideas, your audience is getting a picture of what it is that they can do with the information. So preparation is know your points, 3 main ideas, frame your message with all of the information around it, and refine your story. Make sure your stories have connections one to the other. You want to do that as you are preparing for your presentation. The key to your success is telling effective stories. And sometimes your stories can be something that's happened in the past, something that's happening right now, or something that will happen in the future as a result or as it pertains to your key point. I remember in presentation skills, the first time I was giving a presentation, I was so nervous. I knew my information, but I was just nervous. And I remember saying to myself, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to walk out from behind this podium, and I'm going to greet the audience. There's nothing for me to be nervous about. And I did it beautifully until I realized my notes were back on the table where I had walked from. And I then said to myself, you need to do something. So I was prepared, and as I was doing it, I got better and better at it. So taking that first step is very, very important to the key to success. Telling your stories. And sometimes you might be vulnerable, sharing some things about you and your world. But the intent of telling your story is so that there's a call to action. What is it that you want people to do with the information that you're presenting, your 3 main ideas? In other words, they're asking, what's next? What is it that can help me be more successful? Remember, it's not about you, it's about your audience and making sure that they walk away with what it is that they can do with the information. Now, a little bit about your audience. You're going to have all kinds in your audience with all different objectives, but also all different personality types. And just in the picture here, we talk about that some people are there to collaborate, some people are there to get the facts, some people are there to find out more about results, and some people are there to get that all through a social interaction. You won't know that until you observe their behavior, and your job is not to curtail their behavior, but to maximize why they are there so that they can maximize their interaction. One of the things you need to be doing is looking at your audience. Now here we've taken away all of the facial features and just left I'll call it the foundation, because emotion first shows itself on face. And taken from the emotional intelligence information, here are the 6 basic emotions that most people display. And you will see this in your audience. So you want to be looking at that. We want more happiness, right, than anything else. But you might be telling a story that you want to elicit one of these behaviors, right, because your information will solve or resolve it. That's why it's very important. And you can do that certainly through your voice and through your visual aids. One of the things we want to always keep in mind is that we are a visual society. We didn't create it, we just need to work with it. So why should visual aids be used? And they should be used whenever possible. We want to make sure they're visible, they're clear, and they're simple, right? Because 55% of the world is visual, 38% are vocal, and only 7% resonate with just words. So we don't want to frustrate anyone. We want to make sure that we use our visuals so that our messages can be retained. And here's some research studies here that message retention when you're a visual is long-lasting. A picture can say 1,000 words. Again, it helps you achieve your objectives when you are more visual, so that you go from the top graphic to the bottom graphic. And certainly visuals keep the mind engaged. So it's audience involvement. As you can see, we have gone through most of this presentation being very visual. A master at visualization is Steve Jobs. He was the master at getting his message across. His visuals were very simple. They were crisp. They were clear. And as you remember, he was the most important part of the presentation. So a little bit about those 7% that visual aids behind us. Here's very key. If the guy or gal in the back of the room can't read it, you failed. You want to make sure you're using no less than a 24 font, and that's small, on your PowerPoint. Today, with all of the graphics that we have, you have the ability to move things forward and use the 3D effect, and we suggest you do that so that you can stay on target. So we've talked about keeping your audience attention by making sure you've got stories, don't be boring, that you're on target with objectives, that you use yourself, that you are visual, that boosts, that you have transitions in your stories, that you involve your audience, you're adding value to them, and certainly that they are engaged both in their mind as well, in their hearts, as well as in their body language. So as you look at time, you always want to make sure that you remain on time and that you focus on time. And our time together today has been shared, looking at the things that we said we would, and certainly looking at some of the action commitments. So here's something I'd like you to do. I'd like you to pick up your pen, and I'd like you to write down, what's that one thing that you want to remember from the time that we have shared here? What's one thing you've learned and or reinforced and or is a skill you want to develop more? Because we have ways for you to develop that more. I'd like you to write it down. The key to writing it down is that it becomes memorable. That's a presentation technique. And writing it down versus typing it in, there's something to be said about the mechanics. It is more of a connection with your mind than typing does. So if you want to be memorable, we want to make sure that we are less tech. Simple, very simple. So you have that one thing you want to remember, to do, and or develop. Wonderful. So as you can see, what I've just done is I've gotten a call to action. What is the one thing that you want to remember and or do to learn more? Creating a what's next for you. And all good presentations have that factor built in. Now, what we didn't tell you was that we would, at the end of our presentation together, have an opportunity for you to share with us what are your questions, what stands in the way of you having a total wow experience. So I'm going to engage Ginny again as we look to the questions portion of our session here. Ginny?
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kathleen. Kathleen, if we could just go to the next slide
Yes.
quickly. Before we get to the questions, I just want to thank you, Kathleen, for this great presentation, for your time today. I also want to thank all of the attendees for joining us and participating in this discussion. And to show our appreciation, we have provided a 20% discount code, which is webinar 081115 for the attendees to use towards a future program in the Master's Certificate Leadership for the 21st Century. And also noted on this slide are the dates Kathleen will be instructing her session, Mastering the Messaging Process as a Leader. And as I mentioned, a link to the archived recording of this presentation will be sent to you shortly. So now we're going to open it up to the questions portion of the webinar, and we invite you to ask any questions you may have. And we actually have some coming in. And Kathleen, the first question that we have is it difficult to alter your presentation to accommodate the audience's level of interest or interaction?
Oh, that's a great question. And as part of preparation, what you want to do, and I find this very helpful, is to have 3 levels of prep, right? One is if you were reduced in time from a preparation, say you had 30 minutes and you now only have 10, what would be the key things that you want to get across? Number 2, what is if you prepared for 30 and you find yourself with more? What are the things that you're going to add? Those 2 things combined with the actual presentation helps you know how to adjust the information. And as you get more feedback from your audience, what do they want to know more of? You can cut down in one area and build up in another. So that's just one of several strategies that you can use that would help accommodate for the audience's interaction and certainly their interest.
Okay, great. The next question we have is, what happens if audience interaction leads the presentation off topic? Do you have any tips on how to lead the group back on topic?
That's an awesome question as well. And that often happens, right? As people start to talk about things and other people interact, what the presenter of the information needs to always keep in mind is what's your goal, what's your main idea. And as conversations start to get off that idea, a simple technique is to talk about, hey, this is a great conversation, and we can take this offline. Let's get back to what is it that we need to be focusing on here. And here's the key thing. You want to say to your audience, what I'd like you to do is write this down so we don't forget it. And if we have time, we'll come back in this session to talk about it. If not, you and I can have something off session. How does that sound to you? You want to make sure you engage the person so that they don't feel like they've been cut off, but it keeps you on track.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, the next question we have is, besides from visual aids, are there other things you would suggest to use to make presentations more lively and interactive?
That's a great question. So they're all great questions. Remember, you are visual, and you create visuals through your words. So again, your stories are a great way to create interaction. Asking questions, and questions that don't have to be answered verbally, but could be answered maybe with raising of the hand and or nodding of the head. That gets interaction, and that becomes more lively. But more importantly, if you can inject some fun and some humor into the presentation, right? I don't want you to be a stand-up comic, but look at the day that you are presenting. Was there anything that happened that day that you can relate or bring into your presentation? I oftentimes find myself, after having availed myself of the news, that there's something that has happened that day that I could bring in that's engaging and makes the interaction more lively. So you want to be looking at that. And again, be you. Be you.
Okay, thank you. The next question we have is on Mehrabian's research on communication. Was that during times of high emotion, or was that more the research more done on routine conversations?
Well, I think I would answer that question through the lens of today, both, in that high emotion most often is from an environment of work where there's many things going on, right? We may not, when you hear the word high emotion, you might think of the extremes, screaming, yelling, ranting, and raving, and or out of control or becoming very silent. That's both ends of the spectrum. So in that, we are, in the past 5 years, more comfortable in displaying that emotion. It's always been there. So we want to make sure that we are comfortable with our own emotion and what is it that we can do to minimize its impact. But don't forget, emotions are what make us human. And in a presentation, you want to invoke emotion. You want somebody to say, wow, that's an emotion.
Okay, thank you. The next question we have is, what are some ways to control anxiety that affects speaking, specifically shaky voice and breathlessness that often leads to increased anxiety?
Yeah, again, many strategies, and I could rattle them off here, but I'll just go over a few that we talked about here. One is breathe. And you want to breathe deep, right? Most often when we get anxious, we breathe shallow from the top portion of our chest. And you want to make sure that you are breathing fully. That will keep your pace and certainly gets oxygen to your brain. The second thing is make sure that you start your presentation in what I call the mindset of a presenter, which is that you believe in yourself. The third thing that you can do is make sure that you pause as you are speaking. That allows you to breathe. It allows you to smile. It allows you to take in the entire environment, and that should help.
Okay, thank you. The last question we have is, what about virtual presentations? Since there is no body language, how does that change the balance of what's important?
That's a very good one. Remember, it doesn't change the fact that people are visual. So you need to be more mindful of how you put the visualness into your presentation. So you need to be more descriptive. You need to have great visuals to use. You need to be on a pace that is easy to watch. We are all in what I call the entertainment world when we're virtual. And most important when you are virtual is you want to make sure that when you are delivering your presentation, as we are here, that you can't see me, but I am presenting as if you could. I am in full presentation mode. I know that that is my best self, and I want my best self to come forward. So we often in sports say, you play as you practice, and it's the same in presentation. Your presentation will come across exactly the way you practiced it. So you want to practice in full presentation, full visual mode.
That's a great tip. Thank you. So that looks like it's all the questions that we have. Kathleen, I want to thank you again and thank everybody for attending. We're going to conclude the webinar now.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, everybody, for coming to our session.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.